Most generally, the issues that you have with your thread cutter on your machine is that it's not cutting your thread the way it used to. The most important thing is keeping this area clean. Our little access hole here, it's a great place to put your air nozzle to blow the lint out of between your cutting blades. Over time, if the lint continues to build up between the blades, what can happen is the blades spread further apart, so they're not pinching this puller arm that's over on this side. This piece, little boomerang shaped piece, is actually the part that will pull your thread over to your cutting blades, which are over here. If you look at the leading edge of this piece, it is beveled and it looks like it's supposed to be sharp, but we actually round the leading edge of it off so it doesn't cut your thread too soon. There is a notch about 2/3 of the way down the blade, and that is supposed to be there. That part actually catches the thread and will pull it over to your cutting blades. So don't be concerned if you have a needle break and you take your plate off and all of a sudden notice that you have a notch in that blade. It's always been there. If we need to do any adjustments to the cutting blades, our 2 brass colored screws up on top are what we would make small adjustments to get the blades to be closer to the puller arm. Tiny flat blade screwdriver and very small increments of adjustment is all that you'll need to get that to start cutting again. But over time, if we don't keep the lint built up and the blades get closer together, they may smash the washers that are in between, that actually are the spring that allow the blades to move further apart. So at some point you may actually have to take this whole assembly apart to replace those washers. First step in that process is to get your clear Lexan cover plate off by removing all 4 screws, keeping an eye on the washers that are underneath. Just to bring your attention again to the washers that are underneath the clear cover for your thread cutter, there is 1 thick and 1 thin washer at each one of your screw locations. Doesn't matter which washer is on top, be it the thick or the thin. That's just purely spacing to allow your thread cutter puller arm to move underneath your cover plate. Keep an eye on these though. If we don't have these in the correct position, then we won't have the spacing we need for your cutter. The first step to get your thread cutter blades apart and get to the wave washers that are between them are to remove these 2 brass colored screws here. These are fairly long screws and with tight thread, so it will take a little bit of time to get these screws out. I'll take these out now. Now that the screws are loose, we'll go ahead and take those apart. We'll pull our thread cutter blade out of the way. We can see this cutter does have some lint in between. This would have been easily removed by blowing air in between. We'll also see that we have some tiny washers that are between the cutter blades, and they're spring shaped. That's what allows your cutter blades to spread apart and let the puller arm in between. These are the ones that get flattened out over time and cause the thread cutter to not be adjustable. On this machine we can also see there's some white tape underneath the bottom blade. If you have this on your machine, don't remove this part. This was actually installed at the factory to put the bottom blade at the right pitch to make the cutter work correctly. So when you're cleaning, we don't want to take that bit of tape off the machine. Looking at our cutting blades, we have 1 beveled side and 1 flat side on each blade. They are identical, so you can swap positions if you need to. But there is an easy way to get this whole assembly back together again. We stand these screws on their head on the throat of your machine. Then when you're putting your blades together, your flat sides are going to be together with the bevels on opposite sides. So we'll put it back together this way, only with the washers in between. So I'm going to set my blade down on top of my screws. Let my blade hold everything in place for me. Then, depending on how many washers were installed at the factory, you may have 6 washers, 3 on each screw, or 8 washers, as this machine has. So we'll be reinstalling 4 of these washers on each screw. You can either do them one at a time, or you can stack them all together and slip them down over the top of that screw. I'll get the washers in place now. Now that we have all of our washers in place, we can set our top blade back down on our little assembly here. Then to get it reinstalled on the machine, I'm going to pick this assembly up by the screws, which will hold everything in position for us. Then change my grip so I'm pinching my blades together. Then I can move them over to the machine and actually start our screws while still holding everything in one spot. Start both of your screws before you let go. Then once you have the screws started, you can let go of the entire assembly, allowing your puller blades and your wave washers, everything to fall back down onto the machine. Then you just work on snugging up your screws. Now that I've got my screws back down, snug down to hold my blades in place, I'm going to make my thread cutter cycle a couple of times to pull the puller arm over in between the blades, and then do any adjustments to the tension on the blades as it's cycling the machine. There's a little sound that puller arm makes as it goes underneath the blades, kind of a swishing sound. That's what I look for to know if I need to tighten the tension on these screws at all. Be careful not to over tighten these screws though, because you can cause the machine to jam. And if that thread cutter arm is not in its original position, you're not going to be able to use your machine at all. As it's cycling, I'm going to slowly snug these screws down and listen for the sound. There we go. So that's the adjustment to your thread cutter blades. Then you get your plate back on, again making sure that there's one thick and one thin washer at each one of those locations. Reset your screws and your cover plate back on, and you're back in business.